die off, pollination doesn't take place, we all lose out. And we also end up having to use more and more heavy-duty fertilisers to try and get crops to grow because of the poor levels of pollination. It is a question of one's attitude towards the environment. I don't know what's happened to David Cameron, because I've been following his life for quite a while. When he was leader of the opposition, he went off to the Arctic and started hugging huskies, which I thought was a slightly odd thing to do, but I don't know what the huskies thought about it, but they haven't told us. And then, later on, becomes Prime Minister, introduces badger gassing, opposes the pesticide restrictions, and ends up saying that the habitat restrictions are a bit of a problem. I'm sorry, the point is that you have to maintain biodiversity, therefore habitat protection is important, as indeed is protection of wildlife and all the other things that we all love and value. They're part of the world in which we live. Surely we need a British government that recognises that and says we're going to work with others across national borders, indeed on a global basis, to tackle the issues not just of climate change but also of global pollution, and that we try to introduce trade agreements that don't export pollution somewhere else but impose the same conditions on those countries producing goods that we import as we want for ourselves. We don't want pollution anywhere, we want sustainability everywhere. That's how this planet can survive. So it is also about air quality, and the UK Supreme Court decision is a very important one that pointed out that the British government and indeed the London government has been failing on protecting air quality in that city and indeed in many other cities. These aren't regulations to be part of a bonfire of regulations on the 24th of June. These are regulations that matter, that protect our children growing up, not breathing polluted air, that give us all a better future. Why can't we just say that, admit that, and enforce those regulations to give us all decency and clean air, particularly in urban areas? But it's also about how we generate energy. Some countries, Germany and Denmark in particular, have embraced the change about renewable energy. They've developed their solar energy industries far greater than anybody else. They've revolutionised their energy markets, creating new high-skilled jobs and leading technological advance. They've done really well on that. Why can't we do the same? Why can't we do the same? Instead, lower the rate of feed-in tariffs, damage the industry very greatly, and it is struggling in so many ways. There's so much technology that could be made here that could be part of a good renewable energy target. Last week I went to see a methane gas generator generated from plant products and household waste. Very impressive. All of the equipment was made a long way away and imported because nobody in this country made it, because the market wasn't here for it. The need is here for it. The determination of many people is here for it. What we need is a government that shares that need, understands that need, shares that determination, and invests in that industry. There's a lot of jobs, high-tech jobs, that can be created by alternative, renewable energy generation. Let's go for it. Let's show that imagination that it's quite possible. So it's important that we do that. But EU membership is important for a number of other reasons. I've mentioned some stuff about the environment. Second is on working conditions and workers' rights. Now I say this as somebody who, before I became a Member of Parliament, was a trade union organiser in the National Union of Public Employees. I'm very proud to be a trade unionist. All my life I'll be a trade unionist. I will die a trade unionist, because I believe Now, we have gained some important advances through the membership of the European Union. We've gained them not because somebody handed them down, but because unions, like mine, like everybody else's, not just in Britain, in France, in Italy, in Spain, Germany, so on, all campaign for the same thing. So we got 4 weeks paid holiday, maternity leave, paternity leave, protection of agency workers, health and safety in the workplace. 26 million workers in Britain benefit from 28 days paid leave per year. 8 million part-time workers, 6 million of whom are women, have equal rights with full-time colleagues. 1 million temporary workers have the same rights as permanent workers. 340,000 women every year have a guaranteed right to take maternity leave. These are very, very important gains. Now, we would fight to defend them, obviously, if anybody came knocking trying to take them away. Of course we would. Likewise with the Working Time Directive, we would do exactly the same. But are these part of the regulations that are going to be the bonfire of regulations on the 24th that the Brexit campaign want? They want an economy which is a race to the bottom, of low taxation for those at the top, misery for those at the bottom, and high profits taken from those somewhere in between. Or do we want to embrace these achievements, embrace this level of security, and develop and enhance it? Because I think that these things don't actually go far enough. There are other things that we have to develop. This county has very low levels of wages. Devon and Cornwall are amongst the lowest levels of wages across the UK, the greatest levels of insecurity of employment. Well done to our Labour councillors on Cornwall County Council for joining with others to lead the charge to make the County Council a living wage employer. Well done there. And well done our party for having the courage to introduce the minimum wage in 1997. Being in a union that first introduced the idea of a minimum wage to the Labour Party and the TUC, it was one of those great joys being in Parliament, cycling home at 5 o'clock in the morning, having finally passed at its third reading the minimum wage legislation, which meant we at least had a floor below which nobody could fall. It's not enough. The living wage that's now been called the living wage by George Osborne is not enough. I want to see a living wage that's around what the TUC are saying, the £10 an hour minimum wage, in the same way that our colleagues across the water in the United States are campaigning very effectively for a $15 an hour minimum wage. We also have to confront the issues of insecurity of employment, of 0 hours contracts, and the permanent stress that so many people go through because they don't know how many hours work they're going to get that week. They don't know if they're going to get any at all. They don't know what their income is going to be. They then are entitled to claim DWP benefit for the period when they're not working, obviously. I know this from my constituency surgery. They then get in a mess about what they're owed, what they're not owed, what their earning is, what their earning isn't. Then they're sanctioned and they end up with no income whatsoever, which in a disastrous situation can then lead to eviction from the place they're in and loss of their home as well. Do those people that promote the idea of flexible employment and 0 hours contract actually understand what it is like to go through that permanent stress and tension in your life when you don't know what your income is going to be from one week to the other? We want to bring security to employment so that people know what they're going to get, know what their position is, and then will be much happier in their lives, and their children will be much more secure in how they live and are brought up. I don't believe that the Tories and their free market economies, any more than the right wing of the Tory party that want to leave the European Union, have the faintest idea of any of those issues. That is why the Labour Party has this close link with the trade unions, and that's why we make employment and employment opportunities and quality of apprenticeships absolutely central to so much of what we say and what we do. That is the Labour way of doing things. Harry talked quite rightly and very movingly about his life before the National Health Service came in, and about the horrors of the Second World War and all that went with it. That post-war settlement brought about a number of things. It brought about the principles, the NHS, the welfare state, planning policies, public ownership of crucial utilities. It brought about many things. But also at a wider level, it brought about the concept of the universality of human rights through the Universal Declaration of Human Rights at the UN and the European Convention on Human Rights, which Britain helped to draft. And when we passed the Human Rights Act in 1998, absolutely incorporated that convention and the case law of the European Court of Human Rights into British law. There are those in this government and in the Tory right who say that somehow or other the Human Rights Act is a violation of our independence. I simply say this: human rights are a universal concept. The right to free speech, the right to practice your faith, the right of free assembly, the right to have free newspapers, all those things are absolutely crucial, basic human rights. The right not to be tortured, the right to have an independent trial, the right to be heard in a society. Those are very important things. We will oppose any effort to repeal the 1998 Human Rights Act, and we will remain members of the European Convention of Human Rights and accept decisions of the European Court of Human Rights because it matters. Are we to be alongside Belarus as the only European country that has nothing to do with it, or are we to say we want good human rights for ourselves, we want those human rights for everybody else? If we walk away, where is our moral authority to criticise the far right in Hungary for what they're doing to travelling people, the effect and the ill treatment of gay and lesbian people in other countries? No, our moral strength comes if we accept the same standards ourselves. That is what a human rights agenda must be about. Convention on Human Rights has had some very interesting effects in British law. A couple of weeks ago, there was the historic verdict of the Hillsborough tragedy, of those football supporters who lost their lives. Those football supporters who were so abused by so much of our media, who were so deceived, their families so deceived by a combination of media hype, cover-up and dishonesty. Their tenacity, and it was incredible tenacity, brought those things to light, got a new inquest, and got the judgment that was made a couple of weeks ago. They did that because they were able to use the Human Rights Act, because they were able to use the European Convention. So when the Daily Mail and others make endless light-hearted comments about the Human Rights Act, protecting speeding motorists or whatever other nonsense they come up with, it actually matters about bringing justice. And it's those communities, those working class communities on Merseyside, that brought justice for Hillsborough, and I believe will bring justice for many, many other cases that have to be uncovered. The function of Parliament, the function of government, the function of law has to be to enable citizens to have their rights when the state gets too strong, too powerful, and wants to cover up its own inadequacies, as it did in the case of Hillsborough. That's why human rights matters to all of us. One day, any of us might need that. We also have issues of human rights across the whole continent at the present time. There is a refugee crisis affecting Europe at the present time. That refugee crisis is very serious. That refugee crisis is brought about by wars in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Libya. It's brought about by human rights abuses in other countries. And hundreds of people have died trying to cross the Mediterranean. The people smugglers are appalling people. Those that make money out of it are obviously appalling people. Condemning them doesn't, unfortunately, solve the problem. You have to face the issue of why they're fleeing in the first place, why they're trying to gain a place of security. Are we going to solve the issue of the refugee crisis that's facing so many all across Europe and the Middle East by barbed wire, by CS gas, by warships, by barbed wire fences between countries that are a long way away? Or are we going to say, no, this is an issue that affects all of us? Any one of us in a different situation could be a refugee. We could be fleeing, trying to get somewhere safe to survive. And so there has to be a coming together, a sharing of the issue.